Have you ever been grinding away and feeling like you were getting nowhere, or being stuck at a rank that you seem to be unable to climb out of? Well, that's the story of a lot of people who try to make it pro. They practice a lot every day, but eventually end up getting stuck or hitting a skill plateau, and after struggling for a while and getting nowhere, calling it quits. 9 times out of 10, the reason for this is that they are not practicing properly. As we'll be exploring in this episode, the standard way that people practice is not only inefficient, but can also lead to minimal improvement and hitting skill plateaus. So in this episode and the next, I'll be teaching you how to overcome this challenge by training like the pros. In the first episode, I'll show you how simply setting good goals for yourself can be immensely powerful for helping you improve during practice, accelerating your learning, and helping you climb the ranks fast. Welcome to Esports Academy, a podcast and video series where I teach you how to become a pro. We'll be using current research from sports and performance psychology to optimize the road to success, allowing you to unlock your true potential and improve the fastest. A large part of getting better at a game or becoming a pro is learning how to perform many of the skills needed for that game unconsciously and automatically. We talked about this last episode where a pro in a MOBA can hit a perfect creep score without even thinking about it, whereas a newer player would have to put a lot of their focus on it. Or in Overwatch, if you're constantly having to focus on how to position around your team, your ability usage may be far less than optimal. This is essentially because our brains have a limited capacity. You can't think of 10 things at the same time. And this mental capacity is an incredibly important thing for us to understand and make use of for efficient practicing. You see, in order for us to learn, our brains go through a couple of steps. For our purposes, I'll give you the simple rundown. Essentially, first we need our focus and attention to be on something, which causes that information to go into our short-term memory. Now, we get a lot of things coming into our short-term memory every day, so the brain will try to figure out what is important and then put that into the long-term memory where, for our purposes, we'll consider it learned. Now, what it chooses to move onto the long-term memory is a confusing process, but essentially, the more frequently the information gets processed, the higher the chance it will be consolidated into the long-term memory. So then, the two most important things for learning something and putting it into that long-term memory are, first, going over it multiple times, such as thinking about it in the morning and then also before you go to bed, and second, spending lots of time focusing our attention on it. So did it take an hour of our time or just 5 seconds to think about it? If you spend a lot of time attending to something and then recall it later, it's almost guaranteed that you will learn it and remember it the next day. So essentially, in order to make the best use of our practice time and improve the fastest, we have to make use of this system by focusing our attention on things we want to learn for longer periods of time and then recalling that information later. When most people practice, they do pretty well at reflecting back on the things they did poorly or things they want to improve on later, but a very poor job of focusing their attention on those things in the first place. I find that during the average person's practice session, they try to play the game to their very best potential, focus on winning, and then after, think back on the things they need to improve on. And this is good, because when they think back on things, it highlights things for the brain to put into long-term memory, but it's far from optimal. The main reason for this is that their attention is not focused. If we think about what's actually happening here in terms of their mental capacity, their primary focus, or what their attention is focused on, shifts with the state of the game. As the game constantly shifts, so does their attention. Take a fighting game like Super Smash Bros. For example. If you're in kill range, you're focused a lot on dodging their kill setups. If you're both not even close to kill range, you might be focusing on chip damage. Or even more than that, moment to moment your attention shifts. If you're executing a simple combo, grab, up throw, up air into a wave dash landing, your attention is going to be directed at different things depending on the point of the combo. For example, as you throw them, you'll be focused on their DI, or directional influence, which determines which way they fly after you throw them. But when you're landing, you'll be focused on your wave dash timing. The point is, as you play the game, your brain is constantly attending to 1,000 different things moment to moment. How much does this really help in terms of learning and improvement? Remember, if we want to learn something, the two best things we can do are spend a lot of time and attention on it, and then recall it and think about it later. The main problem with this standard process I just described then is that we don't really attend to specific things very much. When you recall after a match what you want to improve on, you'll remember maybe 5 to 10 things that you attended to the most. And recalling them is going to help you improve those things, but not that much because they didn't get a huge amount of your attention in the first place. Think of it like this: if we give our attention a value of 100 before you start playing a game, and you just play it normally, there are literally 1,000 things that will be getting your attention and that will be taking away from that 100 total. You might only give an attention value to 10 to the thing that you spent the most of your attention on during the game. As you recall those top attention details later then, it will help you learn them and improve on them, but if you only spent, say, 10% of your attention on those things, you won't see huge improvements on them. And second, this will always favor the things that are common in your games and not any of the niche skills. So what's the way around this? Simply to focus your attention on only a few aspects of your play. And the best way to do this is by goal setting. If you set an effective goal up before a practice session and have it be the focus of your attention during that session, two things should happen. First, you will play worse. Remember, our mental capacity is limited, so if you're focusing on one thing, you don't have as much brain juice for the other things happening in the game. And that one thing you choose to pay attention to isn't going to be the most important in every situation. So there will be plenty of situations where your focus and attention is mainly on your goal and not on the most important thing to that situation. Now obviously this seems counterintuitive for improvement, but the benefit it comes with far outweighs this cost. With your attention focused on one or two specific things in a practice session, the potential for improvement in those specific areas is so much greater than the potential for improvement of all the other skills combined had you not been focusing on anything in particular. By focusing on only a couple of specific things, you're telling your brain, this is what I want to learn, this is what you should put into long-term memory. And if you successfully focused your attention on those things and then reviewed them later, your brain will listen to you. And not only this, research has linked goal setting to improved motivation, well-being, so kind of things like burnout, increased confidence and self-efficacy, and has been even linked to helping athletes enter the flow state or get in the zone. So by making good goals, you can improve many aspects of your training, and especially for us, help you focus on specific skills in your practice sessions, allowing you to make large improvements in those specific skills, rather than an unfocused practice session that will lead to very minor improvement in common skills. Now, this is all well and good, but how does one actually make good goals that can focus your attention on specific skills? The easiest way to do this is to start big with your grand goals and reasons for practicing, and then to break down those goals into smaller goals that you can focus on more easily. When I sit down with a team or player for the first time, the first question I always have is, why are you doing this? Why do you want to improve at this game? What's the end goal here? This helps establish a baseline for future goals to work from, and also helps serve as a motivation as you connect those future smaller goals into your larger one. Now, once you have that larger goal in mind, you want to start breaking it down. So, for example, you want to think about what that means for you in terms of personal improvement. Look at your goal and then look at yourself. What are the gaps in skill? So if my goal is to become a professional Valorant player and compete in their top pro league and tournaments, I would look at the skills a pro Valorant player has that I don't currently have. For example, I would need to improve my aim, getting accuracy to an acceptable level for a pro player. Maybe I would also need to expand my character map knowledge so that, for example, I know all the good places for Cypher to put his cameras on every map. Essentially, this is breaking up that large goal into smaller skills that are easier to focus and work on. Now, some of these skills are going to be easier to define goals for your practice sessions than others. For example, learning Cypher camera map spots is pretty simple. You can go and practice that without much trouble. But improving your aim and accuracy, on the other hand, can be a little bit more difficult to make into a simple, effective goal for a practice session. And so for the more complex skills like aim, it's helpful to break them down one step further into specific behaviors. So if we take our aim example, what behaviors do you think someone would have to do in order to improve their aim? Well, they'd probably have to spend some time finding a good sensitivity that fits their setup and game well. It might be valuable for them to spend some time every day using an aim trainer. They probably will have to practice their crosshair placement during games, etc., etc. You can see how breaking down skills further into specific behaviors allows them to become simpler goals to define and practice in a session. So essentially, the first step to defining good goals is to look at your large goal, break it down into specific skills that you'll have to master to get there, and then break down those skills more into specific behaviors you'll have to do in order to learn those skills. If you're struggling with how to improve on something, 90% of the time, breaking it down into smaller and smaller behaviors will allow you to better outline a path for improvement. However, this is just the basics. How do you know if your goal is specific enough, and if it's overall a good goal for you to be focusing on? Well, there's a lot that goes into it, so let's take it one step at a time. The first thing to look at when creating a good goal is to make sure that it is focused on your personal skill or mastery. Goals that are more performance-oriented, like reaching a certain rank, are scientifically proven to be far less effective and even sometimes damaging compared to goals that are based on your personal mastery of skills. So if you have a goal that is to reach a Grandmaster rank or something similar, break it down. Take the skills that a Grandmaster has and make those your goals instead of simply the rank itself. The second thing to be sure of is that you have a way to measure your goals. Having a goal that is measurable is quite helpful when it comes to reviewing it and seeing how you are doing. Humans in general are not the best at reviewing themselves and their actions, so having an objective measure is ideal for tracking your performance on specific goals. It helps you get an accurate measure of how you're doing, which can help direct your learning and also has benefits for things like motivation. Now for some goals this is going to be quite easy as the game will provide you with objective measures. Take CSing and accuracy, for example. The game will often provide you with numbers that you can use for tracking your goal. For others like communication skills or positioning though, the game won't have any objective measures for you, so you might have to get a little bit more creative. Unfortunately, there is no set formula I can give you to make your goals measurable, so it will really just help train your creativity. For example, one skill that often needs work for new pros in team games specifically that is difficult to measure is communication. One simple way to make this measurable is to set up a voice recorder in the background when you're playing and then look back at it after and count the spikes of activity to get a general number of times that you communicated. By no means is it perfect, but having some number to look at over time is better than simply how you felt you were doing. The point is, goals will be easier to achieve if you have a way to measure their progress, so get creative and try to find one for every goal you set. Another thing to take a look at when making your goals is the intensity of your goals. Essentially, you don't want your practice session goals to be too ambitious. What I mean by this is that, for example, if you are at an accuracy of say 25% and the pros are on average at an accuracy of 80%, it's not a smart goal for you to aim for 80% right away. Even if you highlight aim as the area you need to improve the most, having the goal of jumping right from 25% to 80% is too ambitious. Could you do it? Absolutely. But it's going to be incredibly inefficient. Imagine a volleyball player who only practices their spiking. Would they be the best at spiking on their team? Absolutely. Would they be a starter because of it? Hell no. They would be riding the bench the entire season because their other volleyball skills would be barely better than when they were a child. It's much more efficient practice for you to train all of your important skills little by little, step by step, than it is to reach a pro level one skill at a time. The last thing that you want to check is if your goal is specific enough or maybe even too specific. So take any goal that you have defined for your practice session and then imagine yourself going through a practice session and focusing on this goal. Can you see it coming up often enough to efficiently practice it? Is it defined well enough that you know exactly what you're looking for? For example, let's say you want to get better at ADC in League of Legends, because you often find yourself dying in lane, especially to hook champions. So you make the goal of not getting hooked in lane anymore. This goal is too specific because if you imagine a practice session, it is entirely reasonable that you will never play against a hook champion, so you'll never get to practice that goal. What you want to do is take that goal and generalize it a little bit. For example, you could make your goal to keep out of the effective threat range of enemy supports. So if you do end up going against a hook champion, it would help you practice not getting hooked, but it would also apply to all of the other supports you run up against as well, even those without hooks, thereby giving you something to focus on every single game. On the flip side of things, if your goal was to stop dying in lane, that is too general. There are a lot of things that can lead to you dying in lane, and so it would be hard to know what to focus on in your practice session. Rather, it would be better for you to take some time, watch some replays, and try to figure out why you are dying most of the time so that you can focus your goal on that reason more specifically. So essentially, take 2 minutes to visualize your next practice session and see if your goal would be something that you can consistently focus on. If you think it might not come up that much, try to generalize it. If you don't have a clear focus, try to make it a little bit more specific. Okay, so once you've gone through and made sure that your goals are focused on your personal skill development, measurable, not too ambitious, and specific enough, the last thing that you need to decide is how many you should bring into a practice session. Now, there's no specific number that is best, but you want to keep it pretty low. I would suggest 1 to 4. Remember, the function of goals is to direct your attention on specific things that you need to work on. So the more goals you have, the less attention you'll be able to give each one, and the less practice and improvement you'll get on each one. So really, a lot of it comes down to what you need to work on, and therefore what your practice session is going to look like. For example, a lot of games have distinct phases or times that the game goes through, naturally making you play differently in those different phases. An easy example is CSGO and Valorant. Half your time is spent playing on the attacking side and the other half on the defending side. Or more generally in MOBAs, you have a laning phase, mid-game, and late game, which each have their own distinct playstyle. For games like this then, you need to figure out if your goal is going to apply to all stages of the game or just one of them. Really, I like to use the visualization technique that we were talking about with the specificity of your goals. Visualize your practice session, go through some games in your head, and see if your goal will apply to the whole game. If we take our example from earlier of wanting to die less in lane and stay out of the effective threat range of supports, that's a great goal for the laning phase, but not as great for the mid and late game. So in that situation, you would likely want to bring 1 or 2 more goals into your session that focus more specifically on the mid and late game. If, on the other hand, your goal is something like map awareness, you might only need that as your sole goal for the practice session because it applies well to all stages of the game. So try to keep your goals to a minimum, but also make sure you always have something to focus on, no matter the stage of the game. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the importance of goals and how to create good ones, so let's quickly recap. If you're only going to remember one thing from this episode, let it be this. Always make sure you are specifically practicing a skill that you need to improve on in your practice sessions. If you do this, you can manipulate your brain and memory processes to learn faster, and the best way to do this is through goal setting. To set good goals, you want to first break down your larger goals into more specific skills, and then those skills into behaviors. And then take those behaviors and make sure that those behavioral goals are focused on personal mastery, are measurable, aren't too ambitious or high achieving, and specific enough for you to have a clear focus for your practice sessions. If you do all this, I guarantee you will see improvements on those goals, see yourself consistently becoming a better player, and rising the ranks in no time. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this second episode of Esports Academy. This episode is the first part of 2 episodes focusing on developing your practice schedule to optimize your learning, so make sure you check out the next episode as well if you found this one helpful. We'll be diving into the average day of a pro, looking at their schedule and how you can follow it to improve even faster. As always, if you enjoyed, make sure you give us a follow or subscribe or whatever you do on your platform of choice, and stay connected through our Discord server. You can find the link in the description. That's all for this episode, and I hope to see you in the next.